Greetings, everybody, and welcome to the campus of Bethany Lutheran College. I'm Gene Pfeifer, president here at Bethany. I am thinking that we have many people who know Bethany well in attendance tonight, but we also are pleased to welcome guests to the campus. And so I thought I would give, by way of introduction, just a very brief overview of what is Bethany. And if there's one message I would want people to take away, what is Bethany about? What I would want you to know is that Bethany is abundantly blessed by our gracious God. That's what I would want you to know about Bethany as its president. We can talk about our beautiful 50-acre campus that God has given us over nearly a century of time. We can talk about the dedication and the mission fit and the high quality of our faculty and staff, the enthusiastic and large student body that we have at Bethany. We've been blessed in an era where enrollments in higher ed have been kind of crumbling. We've been blessed with record enrollment for the past 3 years. That is a unique blessing from our gracious God. But that's not, to me, the greatest blessing at Bethany. And that is now for 99 academic years. Next year is our 100th anniversary school year. For 99 academic years, Bethany has remained grounded in its Christian mission. So as a Christian college, boldly confessing that we ascribe to the teachings of the Bible as aligned with our church body, the Evangelical Lutheran Synod, we have never wavered in that over 99 academic years. That's truly a blessing. And at Bethany, we carry out a twofold purpose, which is unique in higher education. Certainly, like every college, we are aimed to help equip our graduates for productive and fulfilling lives in all vocations, whether it's in their families, their churches, communities, and of course their workplaces. But our chief purpose is that we are seeking to engage every one of our students with their Savior Jesus. And so here at Bethany, we fortify our students in Christian faith and teaching through that wonderful faculty and staff that we have. That's what I want you to know about Bethany. To introduce our speaker tonight is a member of our Board of Regents, but also his main role is that he is the director of our Center for Apologetics and Worldviews, and that is Reverend David Thompson. David.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm simply going to introduce our speaker for the night, but I do want to thank you, all of you, for coming. And we were going to hold this, first of all, in Meyer Hall, room 101, but we changed it because we anticipated a large group like this. So I thank you for fulfilling our hopes and coming here tonight to hear our very honored speaker for tonight. Sometimes things just kind of fall into your laps. And when that happens, hopefully you kind of run with it. And that's kind of what happened here for this evening. Our guest speaker, the Dr. Reverend Benjamin Kwashi, his sister happens to be my physician, and we always talk about theology when we get together. And then I got to know a few things about her brother back in Nigeria and his role there. And so if you've been following things that have been taking place in Nigeria and also within the Anglican Church, you know that there's some real upheaval there. You know about perhaps the persecution in Nigeria. You know about the very significant split that has taken place within the Anglican communion recently. And here we have an individual who has been personally involved in this, not only at a low level, but he's been the leader. He has been Archbishop for a number of years, recently retired from that position. He was the General Secretary of GAFCON, and he'll explain that to you, but that's the organization, the conservative organization among Anglicans that has tried to hold the line and promote an understanding of Scripture that is in keeping with what we believe too. Now, having said that, you're an Anglican? We here are what we call confessional biblical Lutherans, and so we're not united in all our teachings. And for that reason, we are having an event here that is separate, you might say, from the usual practices of church fellowship. This is what we call kind of a free conference, where we don't engage in all those activities that Christians could engage in when it comes to fellowship and worship and so forth. But nevertheless, he will be speaking for himself. He will be explaining to you some very important things that many of us have no idea about, because we've been living here in the United States where things have been relatively peaceful. And so he's going to bring to our attention what's been going on in Nigeria, something that is very, very important for us to understand. And so even though he comes from this Anglican background, we're going to hear some things that are very important for us to understand, so we can relate better to the persecution that's going on over there in Nigeria, and also so that we might understand the struggles that the Anglican Church has been having as well. So I've had this privilege of meeting him now. We met on Saturday for a couple hours. We had a great discussion. And what I noticed so clearly about the Reverend Dr. Kwashi, or Ben as he also likes to be called, is that he's a man of great conviction. He's very, very courageous. He's somewhat insane, in my opinion. But he tells me that his wife is even more insane than he is. Just to give you, I'm a man of compassion, and his wife is a lady of compassion. Right now, back in their home in Nigeria, they have 70 foster children in their home. And that is up and down, but 70 right now. Some of them are foster children there, as I understand it, because they have lost their parents as a result of terrorism. Is that correct? Yeah. So he knows all these things firsthand. He also has been very much involved in what's been happening within the Anglican Church and trying to promote inerrancy, etc. I've also noticed one more thing about him. You think about his life and the assassination attempts both toward him and his wife. What I find also so amazing is that he's got this great sense of humor. He loves to laugh and enjoy life. And so, in spite of all that's going on, he is able to look at life in a very positive way at the same time. So it's a great honor and privilege to have him here with us tonight. Please welcome our speaker, Reverend Kwashi.
Thank you very much, President Jim and David, and of course, the chaplain Don. It's a privilege for me to be with you. I didn't know this college existed, but now I know. And who knows, we might have some other connections in bringing some of our children to find education in this place. I will be remiss if I do not begin with a great news for all of you. The reason I'm in America is to get treatment from cancer. In April, I was diagnosed with cancer stage 4, a mass nodule on my right lungs, underneath my right lungs. So I was under treatment from April through to September. And by September, I begged the doctors to let me go home because the children were organizing my 70th birthday. So I did go. 23rd September, we had a week of celebrations. And then I came back 3 weeks ago for a continuing treatment and review. My doctors were very impressed, and he decided to check me again, put me through PET scan. And the PET scan came clean, but he was not satisfied because this is the third time I'm having stage 4 cancer. The first one was a colon cancer, stage 4. The second one was my liver, 40% of my liver was masked completely, stage 4. And so this one, he said, look, we're tired of seeing you here, Ben. We better be sure that this thing is gone for real. So there is a new research now on blood samples with a company called Signatera. So even after the PET scan, he took my blood to the Signatera research, and the results would come in 2 weeks. So yesterday the result came, and it was 0.00, so I'm cancer-free. I think that it's amazing, because every time I am struck by cancer, I would write my last rites, and then I don't die. Then this is the third time, but this time I didn't write anything. I just said, Lord, all is in your hands, and here I am. So I'm going to go back. I sent the notes to my friends and to my children, to my wife. Everybody was rejoicing last night, that I'm going to come back healthy. It would seem that God has a few more days for me to see people like you and many others around the world. My wife is Lutheran, ardently Lutheran. I met her Lutheran because the Lutheran church did a very wonderful work in the northeast of Nigeria, and it's also one of the Boko Haram most persecuted regions, and so that's where I met her as a young catechist many years ago. I saw her, then she came to college, and then we met, and it was a tough one. If you want to know the story, it's been written in a book, and it's on Amazon. It's called Gloria, the Archbishop's Wife. And you will see how a country girl, a real rural village girl, can tame a boy like me, a city boy like me. But I'm going to break my discussion this night in two. I would like to bring, first of all, the aspect of the gospel, its effect, and the repercussions that comes with the gospel for all Christians. And I want you to know that persecution cannot, will not, and can never kill the church. It's not possible. No matter how weak the church is, the gospel still has the final solution to the world's problems. And it needs Christians who know the gospel, who believe the gospel, who accept the gospel, who choose to live the gospel with the dangers that follows it, as well as the ethical demands that must be seen. Because that was how the first century world was transformed, by Christians, most of them slaves. So sometimes I enjoy being in northern Nigeria, where I am known, I will have nothing, because in some places you can't even have a land in northern Nigeria. The Muslim parts, you can own a land as a Christian. You can build a church. And anybody can just create problems for you. So being oppressed and suppressed and persecuted just refines our faith. And I'll tell you a story as I get on. But let me open scriptures as I start on that. Romans 1, verse 16 and 17. Dear God, I pray that your word will be true as it was then, and the purposes for which you wrote this word through Paul, that the same will be as effective in our lives even now. And I ask it in Christ's name. Amen. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, For it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith. As it is written, the righteous shall live by faith. I was born into a Christian home. My father was one of the earliest converts, following his older brother. The missionaries came to our home area in 1907, and my father was taken by the missionaries to Zaria City, where Dr. Miller was, and my father was taken by Max Warren. So he was baptized there, he became a Christian and took the name John, and his confirmation name Amos. Kwashi is his home name. And my mother is the daughter of a pastor. So inevitably, we were born into this faith. And growing up with my father, he was a teacher, a headmaster. By 1936, he was already a grade 2 Cambridge headmaster. So the English we speak is King James, the Queen's English, and he insists on the dictions and all of that. So for our prayers, we use the 1662 prayer book. So when I saw this evening we were going through the evening prayer, it was the same thing. The Magnificat, the versicles and responses, and all of those chants. But ours was in the old language. So, my soul doth magnify the Lord. Those were those kinds of things. Doth and magnifieth the Lord. By the time I finished secondary school, I go in my freedom age, 17. So I was free from all those thou wentest, thou camest, whither thou goest, and all the King James, thou should not dissemble nor cloak them before the face of thine almighty God. Thou should confess thine sins before. I thought I was free. And I was. And the devil welcomed me into his world, because now there was no restrictions of father or mother. Until in 1976, I met a gentleman who was witnessing in the streets of Lagos, and he introduced me to a faith in Jesus Christ. It was a remarkable experience, because my story is my younger sister is here. I mean, she spoils my good name, actually. She just ruins my reputation because she tells my stories anyhow. Most of it is true, actually. But nobody could believe that anything could change me. Only God. And it happened, because the way it happened, nobody forced me, nobody beat me. In sharing the gospel, a track, John 10:10, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And I broke down. And from that day on till today, 52 years, I've not looked back. Jesus saved me. But I did not know that in accepting a genuine gospel, to live for the gospel, to believe the gospel, to live out the ethical demands of the gospel, I didn't know the other part. That is the cost of being a disciple of the gospel. And that was kept away from me, which was good. Because if I had known, I would not have accepted. But I grew in that, and 2 years down the road, it was clear to me that I was being called to a rural ministry, because the privileges that I had as a young man and what now Jesus gave me in conversion, and I was leading many other young people in Lagos, in the rural areas, because the man who discipled me was always taking me out to the villages, to the islands in Badagry, all those places. And what I saw fascinated me. The rural people lived a simple life. It was not, they were not afraid of the mosquitoes. It was there, but they were okay, and they were singing and praising the Lord. And I said, Lord, this is what I'm looking for. And my bishop so wisely accepted me. And that began the journey that began to unfold me into knowing this gospel. Paul, in telling the Romans, excuse me, found out that in a city life, the Christians who know the story of the gospel have difficulties identifying publicly with a crucified Savior. Because you must understand that the crucifixion was not meant for the Romans. It was for some recalcitrant foreigners, blasphemous people, murderers, and people who are accused for treason. Jesus was classified as that, the worst of the criminals. So when you're going to talk about Jesus in public to an enlightened city people, they will laugh at you. You will have jeers. Nobody will clap for you. Oh, that criminal? Crucified? Do you believe that? So people kind of shy away from their faith being lived out in the public space and in the marketplace. And Paul insists that I'm not ashamed. And brothers and sisters, let's begin there. Let's begin there. It would seem that the Western world has been inoculated and conditioned that we can't speak out our faith. We cannot even live out our faith. We're so not wanting to offend the culture. A culture of tolerance. A culture that puts down the cost of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Paul says, no, I'm not ashamed. But he's not ashamed. Why? Because the crucifixion of Jesus Christ is the heart of the reason why I am able to stand before you or anybody in the world to declare that the gospel that we have received is the only message that has the capacity to change the heart of anybody, no matter how hard. Only the gospel can. My father couldn't change me. My mother couldn't change me. Nobody could change me. My school principal, because I went to a military school, the commandant, he was a major general. And when he heard that I'd even become a bishop, he invited me to his house. He knew the students, all of us, one by one. And I was already cut out for infantry. Because when this army calls you a good soldier, if there are soldiers here, you know what that means. It means you are the worst of the worst. You are daring, adventurous. You don't care. My very first year, I was always in the gallows. Well, we call it gallows because that's where they lock you up so that you gain your sanity. The commandant knew me very, very well. And he was shocked that I had not only become a Christian, but I now was a bishop. And he said he had to look on the list of all his students in my class. I was nothing near church. In fact, I was a provost. So the Muslim students had to fast. I will make sure if they didn't, they will also go into things we do in the army. We don't talk about that. If you are a Christian, you didn't go to church on a Sunday, boy, you are dead and buried. That was my job. I kept the school order very well. I commanded a block. Nothing to do with church. So he was shocked. He said, my Lord, I know that such and such person took a discharge and went to seminary, but you are not one of them. What happened? I said, sir, it's Jesus. The gospel turned the whole Roman Empire upside down for God. Because it is the power of God unto salvation. We've given up our children to psychologists, to all this. The gospel, folks, the gospel. At home and anywhere. The gospel. The crucifixion of Jesus Christ was not the end. He died, but he rose again. That's the gospel. So that instead of me dying for my sins, Jesus died for my sins and clothed me with his righteousness. When I came back home and my mother saw me, immediately she saw me, she knew something has gone wrong. Something has happened to me. Because for the first time, I had a haircut, I tucked in my shirt, and my belt I was looking neat. She was shocked. Honestly. She thought it was one of my tricks because, if your mother is a pastor's kid, you can trick her. Just tell her, Mom, I don't have money to go for choir practice. And she'll give him money. And you go and squander it and you come back. Nobody cares whether you went for choir practice or not. So I tricked her a lot. So this time around, she looked at me. She said, when you hear her say Benji, you know that's serious. She said, Benji, I hope this is not one of your tricks. I said, no, Mama. 2 days passed, 3 days, a week later, and I said, Mom, I think I'm going into ministry. She said, no. Being a Christian is enough. But ministry, you're going to ruin the whole place. I mean, please don't put me to shame. She was satisfied that I was a Christian. That was all. So when I went to seminary, she would come regularly every month. She wouldn't tell me, but she would come and people say your mother came. She would always come to say, is Benji still in school? Because for 17 years, she did not know peace. From the day I was born, my stories are many. For 17 years, she didn't know peace. So now I'm coming at 20 and I'm telling her I'm changed. How would she believe that? And when an African mother hears that, she puts her hands on the head. It's like a funeral. She said, Benji, save me. The gospel saved me. The gospel saved me. And people watched. But Jesus has clothed me with his righteousness. It's not anything I can do on my own. It's just relying by faith from beginning to end. We have a gospel, which is this other side of it. As I was learning in school, now I was understanding. Jesus says, if you're going to come after me, take up your cross. It involves suffering. Not punishment, suffering. And I was to discover later on that we have a gospel worth living for and a gospel worth dying for. So I met Gloria and we got married. And I was not listening to what she said. If I had listened, I wouldn't have even proposed to her. Because when she came to the college, the school rector asked and said, Gloria, would you tell us why you have come to this seminary? And she said very clearly the Lord has called me to walk with women and children. I was not listening. I was just looking at this cute ebony black girl, and I was thinking, Lord, if I only could, I love this girl. But because of her wild, rural girls can disgrace you in public. She can tell you no, and I was scared. She has done that for some people, and I saw that I was scared. But I said, but I think I like this girl. But I didn't hear the part of women and children. I didn't listen carefully. Now I have, she feeds over 400 children every day of the year. And 70 are not just fostered. They're actually adopted. They carry our names. Some of them are married, some have their own children, they've moved on. But the ones at home now, again, another set, 70. I don't know how many I'm going to meet when I get back home. She's she's always taking in. It never ends. But we got married. Our 2 little children, I was pastor in Zaria. From the 7th to the 12th of March, 1987, I had preached all over villages. I had opened villages. I've dragged my church members because some of them were doctors and professors in university. We've opened churches. We were doing marvelous work, schools and clinics, and some of them would come with their equipments and medicines and would serve. Every week we had an outreach in the rural areas, as God has called me. But from the 7th to the 12th of March, 1987, and especially on the 12th of March, and the 11th at night, security came to say, look, Ben, you're the leader of the Christians in Zaria, and we're not sure of your security. Please, could you evacuate? Gloria traveled with our little baby who was 6 months old, I think 7. And I was left with a 2-year-old. I said, I'm not leaving my house. Why? He said, we cannot guarantee your security. I said, why? What have I done? What have I done? At any rate, the commandant of the military school by now, he was a young lieutenant when we were in school. He was teaching French. He mobilized security and they evacuated me and my daughter. On the 12th of March, a large sound was heard in my church, 2 sounds in my church and in my vicarage, my parsonage. Everything was blown off. We suspect they put a gas cylinder, thinking I was still in the room to kill me. When you preach the gospel, when you live the gospel, put it in your budget, you will be killed. In any case, we will die anyway, whether you preach the gospel or not. But when you choose the gospel as a way of life, there will be suffering, there will be persecution, and might even lead to death. That night, I couldn't sleep. I was begging God and asking, what have I done? Is it a crime to build schools for people? Is it a crime to dig wells where they can get clean water? What is my crime? Now the problem for me was also that for 72 hours, no police, no security, no fire brigade, nothing. Churches burnt. Over 100 churches were burnt within 72 hours. And the climax was to kill me as a leader of the Christians in that city. I cried and I prayed. A week later, Gloria was allowed to come into town. The place has calmed down, and she came, and I showed her Because the other problem with Gloria, she's very thrifty. Nothing wastes. She's extremely thrifty. Nothing wastes. If clothes were old and the sleeve of one shirt is torn, she'll find another sleeve, sew it together, and then change this one, and then put it on. So nothing wastes. She's an amazing, like I told you, she's more mad. And before that happened, I had been here preaching in Missouri, preaching some mission tours. I was asked to come and preach all over. And so I came back with suitcases of clothes for the children. In those days, it was napkins, not Pampers. So I brought quite a lot for the children, everything. Our wedding gifts, she would not use. Everything, beds, everything was burnt. All we saw was ashes. I took her there. And she just smiled. She said, Ben, you're the preacher. You always tell us heaven and earth will pass away. So it has to start with you. I felt so relieved that these earthly things will pass away. So that day, I picked ashes from our bedroom, from the children's room, from the master room. And I told you she's a Lutheran. She had been to Germany. They gave her a golden cross. That didn't destroy, but it was burnt. So I put it in a mock coffin, plastic mock coffin, that I carry everywhere now. And all my children and grandchildren know the story, because if you come into our living room, if we have any now, we don't have a living room. But anyway, if you just walk into where we're squeezed in, you will see it there. I've carried it everywhere we've moved as a mark that from the 12th of March 1987, I had died. Any other day God gave me was an extra time. And I had no time to waste but preach the gospel anywhere. They will kill me anyway. And I vowed, any money I get, any resources I have, any education I have, I'll pass it on quickly because I might get killed. Doing good, because that's what the gospel does. The gospel inside of us propels you, moves you inside, almost involuntarily to do good to anybody. It moves you inside to see that you are building, you're a community builder, you're a helper, you are useful to God in community, in society. You are a transformer, you are a reformer because you've been reformed from inside. The gospel moves you out and beams the light not on you but on Christ, shining the light to the world. That's what the gospel does. That's what the gospel does. There is no apathy with the gospel. There's no lackadaisicity with the gospel. There's no laziness with the gospel. The gospel is power. Something has to happen inside of you, solving problems, moving things towards pointing to God at work. And that was when I saw Gloria's other side, wanting to help. That has become a mark of her life. I thought the African man would marry a wife, but I think now I'm working for her. I'm following her anywhere she leads. Because as soon as I retired, she moved. I had gone to England to preach. She moved the whole house and children and everybody into a clinic, all of us. So where I'm living now is a little cubicle. And she knows me very well. She put my coffee pot and my table to read and study. That's all you want, and you can lie down on the floor there. And so some of the children on the floor here. Sometimes I say, Gloria, why are you punishing me? What have I done to myself? I shouldn't even have married you. I shouldn't have listened to you. I was not listening. I was looking at a beautiful girl. Anyway, that's what we are doing now. And we've seen people's lives transformed regularly. She's forbade me from asking or soliciting for help. She says, if it is of God, God will provide. That's what we're doing now. So we became bishop in 1992. And I said, no, now at least. A bishop. Who will kill a bishop? Why? So I went through my rural ministry in Jos, Plateau State, and including Nasarawa State. In 7 years, we were able to create another diocese because the churches had grown. Then we concentrate on Jos. Another 5 years down the road, we were able to create 3 more dioceses again. So that was a great job. God was just blessing our ministry and our work. Then in 2001, September the 7th, Gloria had gone. She's been invited to England to do some teachings on Mothers Union and other mission work that she was doing. So I was there with the kids, at that time 4 of them. And I was going to preach in Gombe, which is about 2.5 hours at that time, also 3 hours drive, and come back. So I took our son and said, let's go and come back. Coming back, I could not come into Jos on September 7th, 2001. And I was told that Jos was on fire. So for 5 days, we were stuck in Bauchi. By the time I came into Jos to find out what had happened, all the Christian neighbors surrounding our house, their houses were burnt and most of them were killed with their children on the 7th of September. So when 9/11 happened, it eclipsed our story. But from that day on till today, the killings have not stopped. From September 2001. So I came into funerals, and my house, they had to evacuate the children, so we moved into another quarters where we lived for a while before building the Bishop's Court. That day alone, over 150 corpses of Christians was counted, and several houses and churches in the city of Jos burnt and destroyed. The government was able to douse the tension and help the situation. What they thought was a one-off, apparently, it was just a sign. And from that year to this day, it has only increased. In fact, by 2008, it was now a wholesale, large-scale massacre. 300 overnight. The following week, you hear of 500, and another time you hear of 100 here, some villages. So when you put it all in tally, you'll find that villages have been overrun in Plateau State and in the northeast, Boko Haram and Fulani militia and ISWAP. And so there's a conglomerate of concentration of persecution that has happened. But in between 2006, I had traveled on missions here in the US and then later on in UK. And overnight, some mission organization were in prayers, and the Lord revealed to them that I should be the leader of their mission. And I didn't know anything about it. So they stopped me and said the Lord had called me to lead the Soma mission ministry, and be its international director for the world. So I called Gloria that night and I said, Gloria, sorry, I'm not going to be able to come back from London, and I can come back. So these people had marked out, and I'm sure they knew when I was coming back. So they had expected me that night because the flight was going to arrive at night from London. So as soon as I dropped the phone, about 30 minutes later, Our daughter, who was studying in Ukraine, called me and she said, Daddy, it seems that some people have surrounded the house and they're looking for you to kill. I said, excuse me, you're in Ukraine. How did you know that? She said, Rinji, her younger brother, called her. So I said, all right. So I made a few phone calls. I called Gloria. She said, yes, that people had come, they're armed. And then I was now calling Rinji, our son. And then suddenly his phone also went dead. So I started calling everybody I could call who was a person of influence that, look, my house is surrounded by killers. We don't know who. Apparently by this time, they had entered the house. They had beaten Gloria, broken her head, part of her ribs, her legs. They had done unspeakable things to her. She was bleeding. She was by now half blind. By the time rescue would come, she had collapsed. She had fainted. Took her to the hospital. The next day I came, I arrived and I saw her. We were heartbroken. But one of the things I knew was that by now my ministry had ended because she can't see anymore. She was weak, and there were these orphans who were not many at this time, and everywhere. So it was our little boy who was about 6 years old that was leading her wherever we went. As the year went on, some friends and brothers from Texas, where I had ministered to them for several times in San Antonio, they said, look, Ben, bring Gloria up here. And the surgeons, all of them said, Ben, you've been preaching to us. It's our time now to pay you back. So they treated Gloria for about 9 months, and then she came to Caroline, and Caroline continued from there, and then she recovered and came back home. So we're preparing to do a Thanksgiving of her recovery. Exactly 1 year, this time, another group came. They came more prepared than the first. They came with a hacksaw, with a sledgehammer. They literally removed the door, literally, and came in. And I was there. I said, Bishop Kwashi, I said, yes, we're looking for you. I said, oh, fine. Come out. So they led me. They didn't rough-handle me. It took me to the field in the compound and said, we're going to slaughter you here. I said, fine. Give me opportunity to pray. Then their leader, who was by now raging, said, no, we're going to slaughter him in his bedroom. So they came to the bedroom. I said, can I now pray, please? They said, yes. So I knelt down, but I realized that I would rather prostrate because hitting me on the ground will be easier for them and for me. That I'll easily die. I said, can I read my Bible? They said, fine. So I picked my Bible. As I was reading and praying, I heard a few steps and then a hand holding my hand. And as I tried to open, I saw it was Gloria. She said, shh, keep praying. We were praying. A few minutes later, I saw my son come in. I heard steps, so I looked up. I said, what are you doing here? I said, Daddy, they're all running away. So until eternity, we don't know what they saw or what they didn't see that chased them away, and they didn't kill me. They went away. By the time security forces would come, if not for evidence, it would have been like a fake story. But the evidences are there. They even left some of their weapons behind. Friends, as I round up this section and give you opportunity for questions, let me say this. I'd rather be killed for the gospel than for me to kill anybody. Because if I kill you, who will I preach to? I'm called to bring life, not to take away life. And by the way, I'm a trained soldier. Yet, the gospel shows me a better way of being a soldier of Jesus Christ. And if I kill you, to whom will I preach? I will have no gospel to preach. But if I get killed, I go to be with the Lord. If you leave me, I preach the gospel. Either way, I'm in good business. I lose nothing. Philippians 1:21, Paul says it. Should I go to be with Jesus, or let me live here? If I live, I have something exciting to offer to the world. I have something tangible, something that can transform you, and it's evidenced, is there. The gospel is exciting. Something that moves me every day with joy. And I can speak about it, not with any bashing. It's a simple discussion. I just give you my testimony. Anywhere, any day, any time. If I live for the gospel. If I die, the gospel takes me home. Either way, I lose nothing. I have a gospel worth living for and a gospel worth dying for. Let me stop there if you have any questions about this or comments. I'll be taking a short section after now on the GAFCON story. But yes, David.
So before we get into the second part that deals with what the challenges within the Anglican communion, we have an opportunity for one or two questions, if you would like. If you would like to ask a question, I'd ask you to come right over here and we'll let you ask your question, or I can ask your question for you. The question is, who are the persecutors?
The persecutors are clearly, at the beginning, they used to call them fanatic Muslims. Then it became Islamists. Then it became jihadists. And each year, it grows into something else. It develops into something else. With the rise of ISIS in the Middle East, then there was ISWAP, which is ISIS in the Sahel, that in West Africa region, and then Boko Haram, then Fulani herdsmen, then Fulani militia, then Fulani jihadists. So the groups, there's another one called Lakurawa, there's another one called, there's so many different groups and different interests but they agree on one thing: to Islamize Nigeria. That one is, they have all said it, all the different groups of the killers. But the ones in 1987, it was thought that it was just some young Muslim men who have been radicalized from the groups, various groups in Zaria at that time, that wanted to Islamize the city of Zaria. So you see, it began with Zaria and it's expanded to a nationwide agenda.
One more question, if you'd like. Anybody? Well, then let's continue with your leadership within GAFCON.
In the last few weeks, the Church of England have appointed a female archbishop. The issue is not female archbishop, so please, but I'm just saying that so that you understand that she is a female, Sarah Mullally. But that is not the crisis. The crisis began in 1998. I was there in the traditional Bishops' Lambeth Conference. I was a young bishop. I was there. And I couldn't believe my ears. I couldn't believe my eyes. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The agenda in 1998 suddenly turned to be that the Lambeth Conference was going to discuss and pass resolution for human sexuality and approval of gays and lesbians to not only be ordained but consecrated as bishop. And this was my first Lambeth conference. I thought I was going to come and hear how we're going to evangelize, because in 1988, the Lambeth Conference had declared worldwide a decade of evangelism. And my primate, my Archbishop, had appointed me as chair of the Commission for West Africa. And we had a midway decade of evangelism conference in Kanuga here, worldwide. People were bringing reports of how young people were coming to Christ. Evangelism churches are born everywhere, and it was exciting. So being in the commission, we were supposed to present a report in 1998 of worldwide Anglican evangelism. In Nigeria, for the decade of evangelism, dioceses in Nigeria that were 16 by not up to 16, I think 14 in 1988. By 1998, dioceses had grown to 72. So we were waiting to report that. And then we were also waiting to report people from Sudan. At that time, the killings in Sudan had gone very high. And, we were wondering, what shall we do about the brothers and sisters in Sudan, in Somalia, in East Africa, and all of that? And now, suddenly, the agenda changed. It was a discussion about human sexuality. And for the first time, I would question, is this what it means to be a bishop? Leading people? Are we talking about the same Bible? So my eyes were opened. And many of us, and there were many godly men from America, from Australia, we gathered together and said, what is the real issue? Why should we be discussing this? I will never remember the late Archbishop Garang stood up. He said, look, Archbishop George Carey, you're the chairman here. The things that legitimate husband and wife do in the room, they don't talk about it. How can we now publicly come and talk about something so clumsy as homosexuality in public? It's not decent. But we realized that there had been a subtle move in the church to knock out Genesis from the Bible. And once Genesis is knocked out, you don't need Revelation anymore. And then in between becomes irrelevant. So the issue is theological. But secondly, the issue is doctrinal, because how can a bishop take an oath at consecration that you will defend and preach the gospel and then turn around now and say you don't believe the same Bible? In fact, one bishop was so bold that year to have said that we wrote the Bible and we will rewrite the Bible. So doctrinally, we were heading in a trajectory that was going to lead. And I approached the Archbishop, George Carey. I said, excuse me, sir, I'm coming from a persecuted condition. What helps me to navigate my life and the life of the people I lead in poverty and oppression is the Bible. If you take the Bible away, I will have nothing. It's okay for you in England, America, Australia, Singapore, and everywhere else to throw away the Bible. You have good roads. You have aeroplanes. You have hospitals. You have schools. You have anything. You have everything. So if you enjoy everything on earth and go to hell, at least you have enjoyed something. We are suffering in where we are. We are being persecuted. We don't have good road. We don't have hospital. We don't have aeroplane. We don't have cars. We don't have anything. And Jesus is all we have. And you're asking us to throw away Jesus so that on earth we don't have, in heaven we don't have. So what kind of game is that? 2-0. It's a bad soccer. You lose here, you lose there. It doesn't make sense. So we are going to hold on to the Bible. So the issues we discovered were theological, doctrinal, and mission and evangelism. Because if your mission and evangelism does not offer salvation and transformed life, what do you have to offer? Nothing. Because every natural human being is natural human being. Romans 1. Everybody does as they like. But when you encounter the gospel, it transforms your life. So the primates then resolved that, okay, they are going to discuss the issue. While that discussion was on, within the year, here in America, Bishop Gene Robinson divorced his wife and took a partner and was consecrated bishop. So we realized that the Anglican Church was now heading for a serious crisis. So for 10 years, between 1998 to 2008, there were meetings upon meetings, theological papers presented to show that we cannot deviate from the authentic gospel as we have received it and passed on to us from the fathers to now, from the time of Reformation up to this point. We cannot. Besides, the evidence is clear that where the gospel is preached, people are being saved, nations and communities are being transformed, communities are being built, and good works are evident before men. So why should we abandon that in order to conform to culture? Because one of the key arguments was, well, this is our culture. And the other question is, if this is your culture, is that my culture also? Why are you imposing your culture on the rest of us? And in any case, we are telling you, biblical culture does not accept this. The gospel that transformed the Roman Empire and the world till tomorrow does not accept sin, iniquity, and outright disobedience and rebellion against God. Let's not try God. I can't, because already we are in a suffering situation. Why should I invoke God's anger and wrath on me? But they were not listening. So by 2008, some primates, about 11 or 12 of them, no, about 14 I think, because I was there, agreed that, look, we're not going to Lambeth Conference anymore. We should meet in Jerusalem and discuss the future of the gospel in the world. So we met in Jerusalem, and that conference came out with something called a beautiful document that followed after Martin Luther and Cranmer and others crafted. It's called the Jerusalem Declarations, restating the position of Scripture, restating our call to transform our world, not to conform to the world, restating the mission and evangelism that for which the Lord has commissioned us as church to be about in the world. Those points were put as Jerusalem Declaration. 5 years down the road, another conference held in Kenya, and the number of bishops and dioceses grew that were part of GAFCON. In fact, GAFCON now began to consecrate bishops also that were thrown out of their churches, especially here in America. Christians that were believers in Christ were thrown out of their churches. They lost their churches, they lost money, they lost pensions. So GAFCON brought in a lifeboat for them. Some of them were ordained and made bishops, and a province called ACNA, Anglican Church of North America, was created for them. Another one in Canada, another one in Brazil, we created one, and another one in Australia, in New Zealand, we created another. And in Australia also, there is the Diocese of the Southern Cross. So GAFCON continued in its mission and upholding the scriptures and upholding also the doctrines and the 39 articles and the Reformation position of the church, but the continuous work of the gospel continued to grow. Leading that group at the beginning of it was my Archbishop, Peter Akinola. So most of the Western folks thought it was a personal issue. But I mean, once Akinola got to retirement, he retired. And GAFCON continued to grow. The current chairman is the Archbishop of Rwanda, Lauren Banda. And the position still remains pretty strong, so that people like us who have seen the power of God at work in all of our mission work should not be demoralized. People like the Sudanese, people in Somalia and other places where they are being persecuted and for Christ, and Pakistan and all, they are holding on the faith. They are not doing so in comfort. They are doing so in spite of. And many of them are being killed, blasphemy laws and so on, but they still are holding on to the faith. So, Archbishop Welby, in his last tenure, he just resigned. We thought he was going to bring all the Anglicans together back to Thomas Cranmer's church, which was birthed through the Reformation. But no, they continued in this line of culture. And centrally in the issue is the matter of gays and lesbians. And so the mission of the gospel is dying. And it pains us that our mother church is abandoning the faith. So when Archbishop Sarah Mulali was announced, it was clear that the Church of England has thrown the rest of us away, because we cannot see how she herself, Sarah, is very, very sympathetic with cultural Christianity, and they're going to be ordaining gays and lesbians and all of that. So the primates met 2 weeks ago and came out with the announcement. The primates of GAFCON came out with the announcement that our mother church has abandoned the faith. So GAFCON is going to see how we can lead in the mission that we have been commissioned to and called to do in the world for saving lives, transforming lives, bringing good to people, care for the poor, for the orphans, for the widows, bringing help to the suffering. This is our call, not about our pleasures. So, that's where we are now. And there will be a meeting in March in Abuja, in Nigeria, of all the GAFCON primates. And I think major decisions will be taken. Major decisions will be taken. And I don't see how. I mean, Church of England is very rich, so they couldn't be bothered, even if we all left. They are okay. So financially, they are fine. And I don't think they need any more Anglicans from anywhere else in the world. But we're not talking about Anglicans or Lutherans or Roman Catholics, because no denomination can save anybody. Jesus alone, and only Jesus can save. So we are offering Jesus to the world in GAFCON, and that's what we are going to be doing. And we'll pass it on to the next generations. Any questions or comments? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much again. It's hard for most of us here, I think, to relate to what's going on in your life in Nigeria. And we're pretty safe with our own conservative, biblical, Lutheran doctrine here, but we have to face similar challenges too. Now, as I understand it, Reverend Doctor, the GAFCON represents the majority of Anglicans in the world, is that correct?
That's correct. At least 75 or 80% of the Anglicans in the world are in GAFCON.
But the Church of England has something to their advantage, right, at this point?
Yeah, they have the institution, they have the finances, they have everything. And there's about 20% of the rest of the Anglicans are with the Church of England.
And I recently heard, I think just today, that, I don't know if it was the primates or the bishops, they now require 2/3 of them to agree to same-sex marriage, which somebody said now kills that proposition within the Anglican Church or the Church of England. Are you familiar with that?
Yes. The decision was made very recently because it is obvious that Archbishop Mulali Sarah is going to go on in this trajectory that's not going to be healthy and helpful for the church. So some bishops have risen up, but I do not know how far that will go, because what has happened is that quite a number of the seminaries have produced their like. So the powers of the bishops is going to be overruled, even if they said they're going to change.
So if you have a question, raise your hand, yell it out, and I'll try to repeat it for everybody. Anything else at this point?
So before this recent announcement, was GAFCON in communion with the rest of the Anglican churches? And I guess the definitions, at least in the LCMS, is if you're in communion, you can firstly take communion and you can interchange past ministers or other church workers. Was that something with the GAFCON and the ones that you declared not in communion? Were you was it basically the same body and you had the same ministers and stuff, or were they two separate entities and this is more a declaring that?
No, we were all.
Can you repeat the question a little bit if you can?
Yeah, if I understand your question, is the Anglican Communion interchanging throughout the world with maybe America, Africa, and so on, were we all separate, GAFCON and the Anglican Communion? And I said no. The Anglican Communion was one body since Cranmer up to 1998, up to 2008. But the first declaration of break in communion that we in GAFCON made was with the American church, because it consecrated a priest who divorced his wife and 3 children and married another man and was made bishop. That is a complete violation of both the 39 articles, the teaching of scriptures, and the mission of the church. So we broke communion with Tech in America. Another church that followed was Brazil. Again, communion was broken with them. So another Bible-believing group in Brazil, in Recife, was formed into a province, and they have their archbishop as well. So only those who agreed to sign the Jerusalem Declaration are now the Anglican communion that have communion with one another. So a Nigerian priest, a Nigerian bishop ordained a Brazilian priest in Guinea, in West Africa, and I can go to Uganda and Rwanda and some parts of England and some parts of America here, ACNA here, everywhere we're in communion. So there are 2 different communions. There is the Lambeth communion of those who are adherents of what we now call heresy, and then there is the GAFCON, those who are upholding the teachings of Reformation and the Bible. That okay?
One more question? Since you're split into 2 different groups,
the Anglican in Europe, in England, and this other group. So where is this other group centralized at? Where do you have your base? Somewhere you would have a base, I would think.
I think we're not thinking of base now, we're thinking of survival first. But in March, in 2026, they will now meet to decide, to make real decisions. And who knows where this base will be. Maybe it could be in Cairo, Alexandria, the ancient places, together with persecutions, we don't know. But the primates will make that decision in March. But for now, we are more guided by the relationships we have and by the councils of the primates when they meet. So that's how we are guided. But the Anglican Communion, the Lambeth Communion has Lambeth Palace, has everything, and staff and everywhere, so they are very comfortable. But we're not looking for comfort, we're looking for mission. GAFCON is about the mission of the gospel, faithfully.
Right. At this point, I think we'll just wrap it up, but I would like to mention that I believe we have it set up so that tomorrow he's going to be interviewed by Brian Steckert on the line. Some of you watch that podcast. And that'll be a 2-hour-long interview usually, so there a lot of information will be mentioned there as well too. But let's once again thank our presenter.
Say that full stories have been written both about Gloria and me in this matter. So you can look up in Amazon to get Gloria, the Archbishop's wife, and a synopsis of what I presented is in a larger form in a book called Neither Bombed. All right, here they are. She's read all of them. This is my pretty charming black beauty, ebony black, Gloria. It's written by Abidemi Sanusi. She's a British writer, Nigerian-born British Commonwealth writer. So she came to Jos, spent some 6 months just to write about Gloria. Actually, the volume is more than that of what she wrote, but Hippo published just what would make sense. So it's a good read also. And this one also was written by Andrew Boyd. He's a war writer. He's been everywhere, Sudan, Baghdad, and he's been to Jos many times, and he crafted the story himself and wanted my authority on it. So we spent about a year together. When I saw what he was writing, I said, who would be interested in this? Because he's exposed me so terribly. Thank you very much.